questions and the best answers that I've been able to give between September 7th and now. The first question is always, why anxiety? Why anxiety? And I think it's important to note that I wrote the first draft of this book before the pandemic. It's not like, oh, pandemic, everybody's anxious, let's write the book. The first draft was completed before the pandemic ever started. And it was really inspired by my own students at New York University that I saw getting much more anxious than they were when I started there 23 years ago. And then I realized it's not just the students. It was my friends, my colleagues, myself. There was a higher level of anxiety. We didn't always call it anxiety. We called it, I'm just fed up. I can't take it anymore. I've lost my motivation. It comes in many forms, but it was clear that anxiety was increasing. In fact, even before the start of the pandemic, when the Wall Street Journal did a poll on how many Americans feel anxious regularly. Do you know how many people raised their hands? 90%. 90% of Americans identified as anxious before the pandemic. Before the pandemic, there were about 20% of the US population that had the highest clinical levels of anxiety. And that number has gone up to 30% of the overall population, with a particularly large increase in clinical anxiety in adolescent females, in the African American population, and in young millennials, that is, young people in their 20s. And so this is an issue. First thing I want to say is that this book does not address clinical anxiety. I'm not a clinician. I don't treat clinical levels of anxiety, which are those really debilitating levels of anxiety where a real medical professional is needed. Instead, I wanted to treat the kind of anxiety I was seeing in my classroom, in my friend circle, in myself, which I call everyday anxiety. Simple definition: the feeling of fear and worry typically associated with uncertainty. Uncertainty for the exams that you might be having, uncertainty for the tenure review that you might be having, uncertainty for the state of the virus level in your dorm, in your city, in your restaurant that you're going to. That is my simple definition of anxiety. So what can we do to address anxiety? So the first step is to actually, before we do that, I want to say, here's the second question that everybody always asks me. First, why anxiety? Second, why good anxiety? Why do you call it good anxiety? What could possibly be good about anxiety? And so here is kind of the origin story, the origin thesis of this book. I call it good anxiety because at its core, from an evolutionary perspective, the emotion of anxiety and those uncomfortable stress responses that come with anxiety, evolutionarily, it evolved to protect us. It is actually essential for our survival. So imagine a woman 2.5 million years ago just had a baby, walking around gathering food, and there is a crack of a twig that she hears. Now that could be a true physical danger. And so the response that has evolved is worried. I'm worried about it. What is that? Is it going to kill me? And your immediate body's response is to put you into fight or flight mode. How many of you have heard that term, fight or flight? Okay, everybody's heard that term. What happens? Heart rate goes up, respiration goes up, blood shunts from your digestion system and reproductive system out to your muscles, so you're ready to run away from that predator or fight that predator. Critical. It was essential for our survival. And so you can say, yeah, theoretically, I could take your argument that it's good, but I'm not feeling protected at all by my anxiety. So can you help me with that? And the answer is that none of us are feeling protected by our anxiety, because too much of anything, even a good thing, is bad. And overall, in our society, we have too high a level of anxiety. We have the equivalent of those twigs cracking all around us with every news cycle, with every Instagram post, with every weather report that can be very anxiety provoking. And so the first step in good anxiety, and I spend an enormous amount of time in this book, is learning how to turn the volume down on our anxiety. So here is the first neuroscience lesson. So the fight or flight response is underlined by a nervous system, part of the nervous system called the sympathetic nervous system. Fight or flight. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows at least fight or flight. And some neuroscience background and psychology background might know that the official name is the sympathetic nervous system. How many of you have heard of the rest and digest nervous system? Okay, a few, not as many. That is actually our natural de-stressing part of the nervous system. So this is, I do this little test every time. Everybody's heard of fight or flight. Nobody's heard of this other part of the nervous system called the parasympathetic nervous system. Did you know that was evolved to actually counteract and bring us back to a normal, non-stress state after a stressful kind of situation? And so you should all be saying, okay, that's great. How can I activate my parasympathetic system more? And here is my number one go-to, because everybody's first question is, I just need to not feel as anxious anymore. What can I do right now? And so the first, most direct way to activate the parasympathetic nervous system is deep breathing. It is decreasing your respiration rate naturally. And really our only conscious way to activate this system and kind of get it flowing is to breathe deeply. It's not surprising that monks thousands of years ago focused on the breath to calm us. They didn't have the terminology, the vocabulary, parasympathetic nervous system, sympathetic nervous system, but they knew that deep, slow breathing can help. And so that is always the number one go-to. It works so well because you can be doing this while the other anxiety-provoking person is talking at you. You're just breathing. Nobody knows you're doing it. If you have kids, teach your kids to do this deep breathing. And often people ask, well, what do you do? There are lots and lots of ways to bring kind of breath work into your life. But the one that I use and I recommend is called the boxed breathing technique, which is 4 counts inhaling. So take 4 counts to inhale, hold it at the top for 4 counts, 4 counts exhaling, holding it at the bottom for 4 counts. So let's just try it. Give it a try. So close your eyes for just a moment and just follow my instructions. Get ready and inhale. 3, 2, 1. Hold at the top. 3, 2, 1. Big exhale. 3, 2, 1. Hold at the bottom. 3, 2, 1. Keep your eyes closed. Breathe normally. When you're ready, open your eyes. So every time I do this, even leading it, because I can't talk and do it at the same time, it always slows me down. It calms me down. Anybody feel that? Was that useful? So I recommend there's a lot. That's not the only one. So full disclosure, that's my favorite one. That's one I use. You can go to YouTube and find lots and lots of different versions. But this is very helpful, and it is my number one go-to. But that is not the only toolbox. There is part 3 of good anxiety is learning how to worry well. It's a whole bunch of tools that you can use today to get that volume of your anxiety down. And this is just number 1 to start. Let's go to number 2, one that I have a lot of research background in, and that is the role of physical activity, moving your body and being able to quell those feelings of anxiety. So my favorite example for exercise is kind of a little experiment I did in August 2020. August 2020, you'll remember, was right before the start of the weirdest academic semester in recent history. Everybody had to go online. Nobody knew what was going on. And I was asked to give a welcome lecture to freshmen in the NYU incoming class. It was, of course, a virtual lecture. And they gave me 30 minutes. And instead of taking the whole 30 minutes to talk, I decided to do a quick 10-minute talk on the transformative effects of exercise on the brain. And then as a little surprise, I sent them to do a quick anxiety, clinically validated anxiety questionnaire. Only took about 2-3 minutes. And then they came back and I invited them all to stand up in their, wherever they were, their dining rooms, their bedrooms. And we all worked out together for 10 minutes, just 10 minutes of movement. And then I sent them back to do the anxiety questionnaire again. What I found was these incoming freshmen in August 2020, before the workout, their anxiety levels were just shy of clinically anxious. They were highly anxious on this scale. 10 minutes of movement later, their anxiety score had decreased by 15 points, putting them back to normal anxiety levels. This is not a randomized controlled design. It was an experiment I did in class with real NYU students in a real stressful situation just to see what would happen. 10 minutes did the trick. What does the data say? Well, over the pandemic, one of my goals was to look at a wide range of age groups. I learned that I could actually do experiments online and have my subjects take questionnaires and cognitive tests before and after a wide range of exercise, kinds of exercise. So we tested everybody from the 20 and 30-year-olds. One of my collaborations is with the dancer Julianne Hough. She has a new dance modality called Kinergy. So we tested a lot of her Kinergers. These are regular people just taking her dance class before and after. We tested lots of people in their 50s to 60s at the JCC and the 92nd Street Y in New York City. And then we had pilot trials with a very nice senior living facility called Maplewood in Connecticut. And what we found is half an hour, 30 minutes of, moderate exercise had the most consistent effect on decreasing anxiety. Over 20s to 90s, 30 minutes of exercise would have significant decreases on your anxiety levels, your depression levels, and your hostility levels. That right there was the most common finding across all age groups. So that is tool number 2, move your body. And what is the minimum amount of body movement you need to get these anti-anxiety effects? It looks like it's 10 minutes of just walking outside. Just 10 minutes has been shown in studies to decrease your anxiety levels. Okay, so this is one example of the kinds of work actually that I've been doing all of my career. That effect of having exercise, changing the environment of your brain and your body, and having that affect your mood, your affect, is an example of brain plasticity. What is brain plasticity? Brain plasticity is the brain's amazing ability to change and grow in response to the environment. Now, I've studied this in the context of memory. So you give the brain, can you remember this name, this fact, that fact? And there's learning. There are synaptic changes, and with practice, long-term, sometimes even physical changes in the brain. And this is what I went on to study in the role of, in studying the effects of physical activity. Physical activity can actually change the brain's anatomy, physiology, and function. So let's get into that neuroscience for just a second. What is happening when you move your body? And this comes from studies in rodents where we can have them run on a running wheel and then measure the effects on various brain chemical substances. And what happens is with even a relatively short, bout of wheel running, what we see is significant and long-lasting increases in serotonin, in dopamine, in noradrenaline, in endorphins, in growth factors, as well as in cortisol. Exercise increases cortisol in the brain as well. But it is a stress on your body, and so it's helping your body and your brain respond to that physical stress. So the image that I like to give people is that every single time you move your body, it's like you're giving your brain this wonderful neurochemical bubble bath. Okay, it's good for your brain. It is making you feel good. It is underlying that immediate 15-point drop in the anxiety scale. They were 15 points less anxious after just 10 minutes of activity, and it's underlying all of the data that we showed from the 20-year-olds to the 90-year-olds showing decreases in anxiety. That is the effect of that neurochemical bubble bath. But the coolest thing about exercise, and I'm going to go beyond not just good anxiety, really the coolest thing is that one of the things that increases with every time you move is growth factor levels in the brain. Now, it's unclear exactly what one bout of growth factor is doing, but it's absolutely clear that regular increases in growth factor that comes with physical activity, one particular growth factor, it's called brain-derived growth factor, that is underlying the stimulation of more hippocampal brain cells to be born. Hippocampus, my favorite brain area, critical for long-term memory. It allows us to form all the facts and all the events in our memory, keep it in our memory. It is critical for our own personal histories. It is essential for learning for your finals that are coming up or midterms you might have before your finals. All of that learning of the facts, the events, the relationships that your instructors are trying to teach you are dependent on the hippocampus. And what I'm saying is long-term exercise can grow you new hippocampal cells. Is it good? Yes, because studies in rodents show that the more hippocampal growth you have, you get better physiological responsiveness, something called LTP. If you've studied it in your neuroscience classes, is actually higher in rats that have lots of exercise, and they perform better on a range of hippocampal-dependent memory tasks. Okay, now given that, how many of you want a big, fat, fluffy hippocampus because you've exercised so much? Anybody? Come on, everybody must put your hand up. That's the appropriate response. Good. Okay, so in fact, I'll tell you that is my personal motivation that I use every morning, because I work out every morning first thing. So I get out of bed, I work out, then I meditate, and then I have breakfast. And I don't feel like doing that every morning, but I do want the biggest, fattest, fluffiest hippocampus that I can have. And I know that that is the best thing I do every day to get that. Okay, so there is this underlying love of and appreciation of brain plasticity that I wanted to bring to this process of, or this situation of increasing levels of anxiety. How could we change the response, our responses of our brain, to decrease those anxiety levels? Importantly, I'm not trying, my promise is not, you'll never have anxiety again. Anxiety is a natural human emotion. It's there for a reason. It's still critical. It's still protective. So it's always going to be there. We just want to get it away from that too high a volume and get it back into that region where it can be helpful. Where it can be helpful, the best talks that I've ever given in my entire career have been those talks where I was scared before I went on. There were important people in the audience or a big audience, that scares me. But it also makes me really step up to my game. Now, if I went too far, would I lose my words and perform terribly? Yes. So it is the challenge to harness that activation energy that underlies good anxiety, to get it to that point where it is helping you perform, because that's what it's doing every time. Okay, so brain plasticity. Next tool is mindset. The tool of mindset in addressing anxiety. We already went over one really good example of that, and that is putting the word good in front of anxiety. Can you switch your thought process and your belief system in about the word anxiety? And maybe everybody would have, gravitated more towards bad anxiety. But good anxiety is there, again, because it's protective. Can we find the good part of anxiety? That is part of the mindset shift. If you're just thinking, I just want to get rid of it, I never want it in my life again, not only unrealistic, but unattainable. And I talk a lot about how one can shift one's mindset to handle anxiety in a better way. And just to give you a take-home kind of toolbox to use, I talk a lot about the before, during, and after. Everybody has an anxiety-provoking response that will come up in their future. Maybe it is, anybody have finals in their future? Yes, finals. Anybody have grant due in their future? On this side of the room? Yes, several? Okay. So before, during, and after, what are those approaches? Again, in this third part of the book. What can you do before? Well, we've talked about these ways to kind of ease you into either the grant writing or the test taking. What are you going to do? You're going to use your breath work. You're going to exercise so that anxiety level is down, so that energy level is up. The other one that I didn't talk about is how important sleep is for emotional regulation. Anybody get hangry when they haven't slept? I do all the time. You are hungry, you're angry, you snap at people when you haven't gotten enough sleep. And guess what goes up when you haven't gotten enough sleep? Anxiety. So all of these things, it's like, it's a new approach to kind of prepare your brain for these important events, whether it's a grant or a final. So preparing your brain is all these things that you could add to your day before. They will all make you feel good. It will be hard to use them because you think, okay, all I have to do is study, all I have to do is write. But this is a situation where spending that time, taking time away from the task itself to help prepare your brain to better study, to better write, is useful. What about during, especially during the test? Anxiety, feelings of anxiety often come up. And again, you can use the same very powerful tool of breath work just to calm yourself down. And during the event itself, very helpful to learn how to be your best coach. Remind yourself that this is something that you can do, all the hours that you have studied. There are powerful studies showing that the mindset that you have going into an exam, I'm not sure if this works for grants, but certainly in students in exams, can affect your overall performance. Girls told that girls don't perform as well as boys on math tests. They will perform worse than if they focus on their own performance on the last task. How can you use that powerful piece of information to amplify your performance on the test itself? So that's during. What about after? After, I don't know about you, but for so many years, after events like this, after talks I gave, what would I do? Oh my God, why did I say that? I lost my words. I did such a terrible job. Oh my God. in the face of people saying, oh, that you did so well, I enjoyed this, enjoy that, what do I do? What do? We focus on the one thing we got wrong, or the set of things we got wrong. That's not to say you don't learn from your events, but one of the things I talk about in the book is learning how to really focus on and see the totality of your performance. I don't care whether it's an A on your test or a C on your test. You got some things right. You nailed some aspects, and you need work on other aspects. So again, it's a mindset shift about how you can use everything from an A plus to a C to learn how to do the next time better, rather than simply judge yourself, which is not helpful. Okay, so those are just a little flavor of the strategies to turn the volume down on your anxiety. It's actually more than turning the volume down. It is shifting the focus of an anxiety-provoking situation to a learning situation or a challenge situation. Very powerful. The next step is, after we learn and apply these techniques, I should say that I try to throw as many techniques here as possible, including fun ones that I came across as I was writing the book. As I was in a bookstore once, I saw this book by Lin-Manuel Miranda. It was a book full of positive self-tweets. Apparently, he writes positive self-tweets to himself in the morning and the evening. And I don't know him, but seeing his interviews, I said, yeah, I could see him doing that. That is such a great idea. Just focus on the positive. Give yourself, it's part of the strategy of being your own best coach. There's nobody out there that's going to do it for you. Learn how to do it yourself. So lots of tools that hopefully I could reach a whole wide range of people. Okay, so now you've gone through all the tools, you practiced them, you found the ones you like that you don't like, the ones that work, that don't work as well for you. That's what you're going to find. Now what's the next step? Well, the next step is your anxiety level has turned down, your volume has turned down. You have a different view of anxiety, and this is a very powerful moment to turn in and look at those uncomfortable feelings that come with anxiety, whether it's anger, whether it's worry, whether it is just pain. And I know I've done this before as well, we just want to kick those. I don't want to deal with them. I don't want to think about them. I don't want to know about them. But when you step back and turn that volume down on anxiety, what you're able to do is see those negative emotions for how they are informing you. We are complex humans with a wide range of emotions. And I'm going to tell you right now, we were not designed to only live in the happy zone. If you have a friend that only lives in a happy zone, they're a boring friend, okay? We have all these emotions for a reason. So what is that anger telling you about your values? What is that fear telling you about either your history or your values or what is working well in your life? And what I've said in one of the videos that I did for Simon & Schuster for this book is that in writing this book, I learned a lot about my own anxiety. If you read the book, you will learn a lot about my own anxiety. I talk a lot about my own self-discovery. And one of the things I discovered was that I am an anxiety denier. I don't like to admit that I have anxiety. I like to act like I don't have any anxiety, as you mentioned in everything seemed to be well, but I wasn't as happy as I might have seemed. And the other thing I learned as I was going through this book is that I found myself doing something that was really surprising, which is making friends with my own anxiety. Why? Because the volume had been turned down, and I started to realize, actually, there's some really useful information about myself in these uncomfortable emotions. What exactly makes me angry? What exactly makes me worried? And analyzing that from a kind of direct perspective rather than just trying to ignore it all, which I did, admittedly, for a very long time, is one of the gifts that come with this process of good anxiety, of going towards good anxiety. So, yes, exploring uncomfortable emotions. And so, but there's one last step in getting to good anxiety, and that is getting to the gifts or superpowers that I talk about in the book. 6 different gifts or superpowers that come with anxiety. And here is kind of the last part of the origin story of the book. So I noticed anxiety in my colleagues, my friends. I wanted to study it. I had data from the exercise work. I'll tell you in a little bit about the direct studies I'm doing on anxiety in my lab right now, and started to delve into this book. But and we knew it was going to be about how to turn the volume down on your anxiety and try and benefit from anxiety. That was definitely the theme. But what happened was, right as we were about to jump in and write the chapters, I experienced a real tragedy in my life, completely unexpected. So my father, who was 85 at the time, passed away of a heart attack. That wasn't so surprising, but devastating. You lose your father. But 3 months later, my younger brother, who was only 50 years old, also unexpectedly passed away of a heart attack. And so my family and I were left in terrible grief. Grief is not the same as anxiety. And I had to put the book aside. I had to kind of deal with all this. I had to use some of the tools that I talked about for anxiety to deal with my own grief. That did include exercise, did include meditation. And it was probably the hardest time that I had in my life. I felt like I was trying to understand and delve into the difficult emotions of anxiety, but then I got thrown into probably the most devastating emotions that we go through when we lose somebody that we love. So it was kind of like a master class in the most difficult emotions that I had, that we experience. And so going through this, it took months of just getting better and learning to live with those losses. But then I was doing a workout one day with a trainer online, and she said, in the context of the workout and working out really hard, she said, with great pain comes great wisdom about your body. And I thought, that's exactly what I need to hear today. Because with great, it was very painful to go through this. But I realized that there was wisdom and knowledge and learning that came out of it, because I appreciated everybody else left in my family so much more. I appreciated my friends that helped so much more. I describe it in the book as that moment when Dorothy steps out of the black and white of Kansas to the Technicolor of Oz. It really did feel like that. My relationship with my mother and sister-in-law got closer. Probably would not have been that way if we didn't kind of go through this together. And that was a profound learning moment. And then I went back to the book and I said, okay, these uncomfortable emotions of anxiety are not the same as the grief that I felt when I lost these family members, but they're difficult. They are uncomfortable and they are affecting so many people. What good can come out of those difficult emotions? And I found myself kind of trying to squeeze out all the learning and all the information and all the value out of going through anxiety. And that's where the superpowers came from, or the gifts came from. So there's 6, and I'm not going to go through all 6, but I want to give you 3. 3, the easiest to explain. And so you might be wondering, gift, what is a gift from anxiety? And so let me start with the easiest one to understand. Gift number 1 is the gift of productivity. So this came from, actually, inspired by a lawyer that I was talking to. I did a lot of interviews for this book. The lawyer said, I met her at a birthday party, and I told her I was writing this book on anxiety. She said, oh, anxiety, I am the high-paid lawyer that I am because of my anxiety. And I said, oh, please tell me your secret. And she said that she's had anxiety all of her life. But when anxiety comes up about the case that she is working on, she's worried about how the other lawyer is going to address this, whether the judge is going to go this way or that way, whether she has enough support from her own team. She takes all those worries and all of those what ifs, and she simply turns them into a to-do list. And by doing that, she became a very productive, very precise lawyer. And she used that technique to literally kind of use her own anxiety. And so that is one of the gifts of anxiety. Can you use that what if list that comes up about something that's important for you? This is what you're worrying about. And turn it into a to-do list. And why does that help? It helps because actually doing something, taking some action on a worry or an anxiety helps bring closure to that anxiety. Anxiety was developed to do something. You either fight or run away. And so we're not fighting or running away, but we are, asking 3 people their opinion about whether the other lawyer is going to use this argument or that argument. That is very satisfying. And I've tried this myself when that to-do list or that what if list comes in late at night. It still wakes me up, but in promising myself that I'm just going to address each one of these very carefully the next day helps me go back to sleep. So that is the gift or superpower of productivity. The second gift is flow. So flow I wanted to address because flow in its classic state is it's very inspirational, but a little bit depressing too, because it's described as this the state where you've developed this huge talent, and every once in a while, where everything's going right, you can experience flow. And I always picture Yo-Yo Ma playing Bach's cello solo cello suite, and that every once in a while at Carnegie Hall he can get flow. And it's like, that's so depressing. I'm never going to get flow. If he can't get flow, regularly, how am I going to get flow regularly? And so for this book, I realized, I was writing the book, and I went to a yoga class, and enjoyed the yoga class a lot. And then I laid down to the final pose, Shavasana, corpse pose, and I was like, I am doing this corpse pose better than anybody else. I am flowing in this corpse pose, and it only lasted, always lasts too short. It only lasted a minute. But I realized that flow doesn't have to be this, highly trained, attainable, unattainable thing. I realized that I had moments of flow throughout my day. That was just my first one that I realized, this actually is a moment of flow. There's nobody that can do this corpse pose better than I'm doing right now. So I'm flowing. Every time I make my green smoothie in the morning that I find delicious, another moment of flow. And so so the exercise in the book is identify your mini, we call it microflow in the book, your moments of microflow in your life. You always have it. And then you say, well, that's just a thing that you made up. Why is it a gift of anxiety? And it's a gift of anxiety because a concept in psychology is the negative contrast effect. And I have a very visceral relationship with this concept. So the negative contrast effect is that let's say you have this really, 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 really bad day. Everything goes terribly, and you stub your toe, and your dog runs away, and all the things go bad. And the next day, one tiny thing good happens, and you think, oh God, this is so good. I so appreciate this good day, or this good one little thing that happened, because all of the negative things happened the previous day. Well, this happened to me the very first time I gave a scientific talk at UC Irvine, at the famous UC Irvine regular annual memory conference. And I was very nervous. I was a graduate student giving my first scientific talk in front of a real audience of real memory experts. And I was in a session with all graduate students. And so I was somewhere in the middle, but the guy that went before me gave a terrible talk, like really, really bad. He didn't know what was on his slides. We were all just like, please just get off the stage. Please leave, leave, leave. And then I got up. I had practiced. I knew every single thing on my slides. And everybody came up to me afterwards like, that was such an amazing talk, Wendy. And it was a good talk, but I've always realized that it was even better because that poor guy went before me and he was so bad. And so back to flow, micro flow. Micro flow is a gift for those of us with anxiety, which is basically all of us, because those moments of micro flow, that moment of shavasana bliss, that moment of drinking your green smoothie that you made so beautifully, are made even better and sweeter because of the anxiety that's going to hit you when you get to your office. You've turned the volume down, of course, by now, but still, it is a moment to savor. Savoring, very important in the mental health world. And my concept of microflow is just another example of the practice of savoring that I think is particularly important for addressing anxiety. Savoring the moments in your day that will be unique to you. And the final superpower before we end with a little exercise is the superpower of empathy. And this superpower comes from my oldest form of anxiety, that is one that I've had since I was little. And while it might not be evident today because I've learned skills as a professor and a speaker, my oldest form of anxiety is social anxiety. I was a very, very shy, awkward wallflower of a young girl and a high school student and even a college student. And I had years of wanting to ask questions, in the classroom and ask the professor something, but too scared to do, or just, voice quavering because I didn't want to be wrong in front of everybody. And that is just scary. Everybody feels that. Even your professors feel that. And so I realized I was writing the book that experience, that long-standing fear gave me a superpower of empathy in my own classroom because I'm at the front of the classroom now. And I realized that from the first time I ever taught, I always made sure that I arrived early, stayed late, and made sure that everybody, hanging out later got their questions answered. Because I remembered that I had so many questions, but I was too afraid to ask them. And it really became my own secret superpower of teaching. But it originated in my own personal experience of anxiety. Now, for you, I challenge everybody in this room to think about either your most common, your oldest form of anxiety that you've experienced all your life. You know it. You know how it makes you feel. You know how it looks. You know where it crops up. And you can turn that into your gift of empathy by just turning it to the outside and helping somebody else that has that form of anxiety. I don't, just with a kind word. I'm not saying, go and change their lives, but just a kind word is a beautiful expression of empathy. And I can't think of anything more that we need in this world today, but higher levels of empathy. So I want to end with just a description of the kinds of studies that I'm doing in my lab right now to look at what is best at mitigating anxiety. I've told you about exercise. I've told you about breath work. Can we quantify this? Can we quantify this for the college student? And so one of the things it took me a long time to learn is that students really don't want to go and do a whole hour of exercise. And instead, we're doing much smaller bite-sized interventions, 5 minutes only, 10 minutes only. And we're measuring the effects on both cognitive function and mood. Mood right now, but including anxiety, is the most sensitive. But we found significant effects of just 10 minutes of chair yoga on NYU students. Just doing that is significantly decreasing their anxiety. We had to change our control because our control was listening to a podcast. Turns out podcast listening also decreases anxiety. So we had to turn it into homework, doing your homework. Yeah, sorry. But it's a better control than podcast listening. So we are developing a website where there will be different anti-anxiety challenges that vary at the beginning of the semester where everything is bright and nobody has any tests due, to the middle of the semester where stress gets a little bit higher, to the end of the semester where it's code red and nothing is easy. And trying to see at those different levels of anxiety, what is most effective and what will students do? And so I'm really excited about that. And so to end, I just want to do a little experiment with all of you. And so we are going to reproduce that experiment that I did with those NYU freshmen. And so I'd like you to all either write on your phone, write on your piece of paper, one word that describes how you're feeling right now. Be honest. Whatever you're feeling. Energized, tired, hungry, it's getting to be dinner time, low sugar, whatever that is. Okay, ready? Everybody ready? Okay, everybody stand up. Not going to do 10 minutes, but we're going to do 2 minutes of exercise to show you the effects on mood. Okay, so all you have to do is do what I do, say what I say. Okay. Ready? 4, 3, 2, punches. Go right, left. Use your arms. Now we're going to add an affirmation. I am strong now. You say it.
I am strong now.
Ladies, I am Wonder Woman strong. You.
I am Wonder Woman strong.
Guys, I am Superman strong. You.
I am Superman strong.
Uppercut. Right, left. Uppercut, right and left. Here we go. I say, I am inspired now. You.
I am inspired now.
One more time. I am inspired now. You.
I am inspired now.
Last move. Pull it down. Right and left. Right and left. Right and left. Use that bicep. I am on fire now. You.
I am on fire.
One more
now.
time. I say, I am on fire now. You.
I am on fire now.
Good. All right. Okay. Let's finish the experiment. Usually if everybody's on Zoom, I just have everybody put their words in the chat, and then we do before and after so everybody can see. But write down the word now, and just let that be a personal experiment about how just a few minutes of moving your body can have an effect on your mood. And with that, I will thank you and open the floor to questions.
Lovely. Thank you for your talk. I really love the way that you worked in your own anecdotes and experiences. I just wanted to know, what are your thoughts on, changing your mindset versus what's now being called as toxic positivity. So,
Yeah.
you might be met with a struggle, for example, your workout. You didn't used to like it, but maybe in the morning, you turn on a song that you like. You may say, "Yay, I really love this," and over time, it doesn't become such a threat to you or such a hard thing.
Yeah.
But there are still real stresses.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to be real about them.
Yeah.
So what do you think about, for example, if there's a real tragedy, you don't say, "You know what, this isn't, this is okay. I'm going to get through this."
Yeah.
And just acknowledging like when things
Yeah.
are
Well,
really.
no, I totally agree. I say call a big stinky failure a big stinky failure. It's not like, oh, really, you can see the good side of everything. What I do say is that actually I can learn from my big stinky failure. I can learn perhaps even more from my big stinky failure than I can from getting an A+. I got everything right. That means I've got that done. I don't have to worry about that. In fact, I have, it's in this book. I have a journalist friend who said, I've never been rejected in my whole life. I'm like, really? And it turns out that by not being rejected, she meant that even the rejections taught her something that got the piece, accepted someplace else. So I literally asked that question that you did, like, is there something called, is it too much, reframing of things? Can you reframe things too much? And what I said in the book is what I exactly said to you. You need to acknowledge that the tragedy has happened. This was not the outcome that you wanted. But the mindset shift that is not toxic positivity is simply asking, what can I learn from this experience? And I submit to everybody that we can learn a lot from, and in fact more, from the difficult experiences that are not the A performances, but are the C and D performances than we can from the A. So that right there is a mindset shift. It's like, oh, okay, yes, I didn't get the A, I wanted the A, but look at all the things that I can learn now from the D.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? Yes.
I'm curious about your study where you said you had to actually change the control.
Yeah.
Control yielded like similar results.
Right. Yeah.
Isn't that also telling, or is that?
Well, it's telling about the choice of my control. We realized later that podcasts are designed to entertain. And we chose one that wasn't as engaging as some of the others. And we thought that would be just a similar kind of activity that was not necessarily anxiolytic, but it was. And so, that's what you learn in the course of these experiments. And we realized it helped us kind of reevaluate what we were really asking. We're asking, our control is your typical school experience. What is that? So it helped us really refine what the question was. It wasn't the experiment wasn't what is podcast versus chair yoga. It's relative to your regular school activities, homework. We also have them reading a boring NYU email and then having to answer questions about, the safety procedures that they've now implemented. It's not horrendous, but it's just like the boring NYU stuff that you have to do. That we think is the better control for the experiment. Yeah. Yes.
What are your thoughts on why it seems that there is so much chronic stress in society, and increasingly so, because of many accords, it seems we should have less reasons to be worried, like we're more safe on many regards, we're more protected, right? So where do you think this underlying anxiety really might be coming from?
Yeah, this is not my work. It's just from the studies that are out there that we've learned in great detail how much social networking and the algorithms that they do, that they use, can cause negative self-image, cause issues with non-satisfaction with one's own life. I think that is a new phenomenon. We weren't using it in quite that same way. I think the news cycles have become more difficult to read because it is sensationalized, whether you're on the left or on the right, and they make it eye-grabbing, but that also means that it makes it really, really scary. And then I think that what is even more scary today than it was 20 years ago are these kind of existential threats that we all think about all the time, like global warming. I wasn't worried about how much I travel on an airplane 20 years ago, but now I am. And it really, it's truly scary if you look at those stats. So there's scary stats and scary information all around today that weren't there in the same way 20 years ago. So I do believe that there are more anxiety-provoking stimuli all around us. Plus, I mean, I didn't even mention the pandemic. That's scary and deadly. And I hope nobody lost anybody, but there were, hundreds of thousands of people lost. So that is devastating. And it's on the back, we're riding on the wave of all those other things, that we get the pandemic on top of it. So it's not surprising that, it was 90% people saying they have anxiety before the pandemic, and basically 100% it would be. That's my guess, but just projecting from how much clinical anxiety went up. It's all of us. We have anxiety. So that's how I think about it. Anybody? Yes, Martha.
So you started out saying you're talking about the anxiety of normal folks,
Yes.
not people with psychiatric diagnoses.
Yes.
But I'm wondering, take a really simple-minded approach and say, anxiety is anxiety, and maybe if people have much, much more, they get a clinical diagnosis.
Yeah.
Wouldn't some of these techniques help? Has anybody
Yes.
done a sort of ashram, breathing, whatever?
Yeah, I mean, it's we had to be careful that to say that I am not a clinical clinician, and these will not be the ultimate cure if somebody does have clinical levels of anxiety. Sometimes you need, stronger interventions like drugs, like, more intensive behavioral therapy. The mindset approaches are a version, a lower level version of behavioral therapy. So yes, it's not like I'm saying that nobody with clinical anxiety should touch the book or use anything in it. Yeah, they can be, but don't use it as the way to cure clinical anxiety. That was the point that I'm trying to make. And also just, I wanted to make clear that there are books out there for people with high level clinical anxiety. This is not one of those books. I wrote it for me. Basically, I wrote it for me. I have everyday anxiety. I was exploring it in my lab, in my students. I have anxiety. My students have anxiety. What can we do? How can I, when I started the exercise studies and I noticed how much exercise was improving me, I thought, wouldn't that be great to bring exercise and be able to harness it so that my students could do better, they can learn better, and they could process better. And so this is a continuation of that effort, specifically for anxiety that, again, I saw going up. So I wanted, it's important to kind of define the group that I'm interested in affecting. Yeah, Sharon.
Ask you about this idea of empathy as
Yeah.
a gift,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe suggest that at times it could be kind of a rotten gift. Because we know empathy activates pain circuits in the brain, and that having a real strong empathy with members of our groups, we feel what they feel as if we're feeling it ourselves in some ways. And so if we have empathy for lots of people that actually is affecting how we feel, it seems like that could increase our discomfort, not decrease it. So it seems like what you were describing was like a kind of cognitive action based around the notion of understanding other people's minds, but that might be different than actually having this kind of full-blown emotional, empathetic response.
Yeah.
Do you see a difference between your
Yeah, I
story
think-
of like your teaching strategy,
Right.
class, Q&A,
Yeah.
versus like what some people study with empathy?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, I do have, I take kind of the higher level cognitive understanding of that difficulty that the students have that I experienced myself. And I mean, my story is true. I realized that I was doing it unconsciously, and it made me feel good because I knew that I was feeling those same emotions when I was a student. So I wanted to make sure that nobody had their questions unanswered. Do I relive their fear when I'm doing it? No, not at all. I kind of step away from that, but I use that kind of I use my historical understanding of that to intervene, to help where I can. And so the strategy is to everybody has different anxieties. Maybe it's anxiety around paying a check. You don't want you don't feel like you have enough to pay a check, and you go out to a restaurant, and so your gift in this sense is to make sure everybody's okay with how much it's going to be before, so that nobody feels that pain. So it's kind of trying to relieve that pain before feeling the empathy, but using the information from what you have experienced to do that. I don't know if there's a name for that, but yeah, I agree. I'm not sending people out to re-feel those pains. I'm sending people out to use their knowledge to help, and just to give a positive word in those situations, or just to keep an eye of on the group and make sure that everybody's comfortable with whatever pain that you have to do. I don't know why that came up, but
Loving kindness, right? In meditation, you talk about loving kindness.
Yeah.
And that's sort of part of that. It's not necessarily empathy, but you can inject that into the conversation.
yes,
And replace conflict with
right,
understanding.
yeah, exactly.
It's more even like awareness or recognition. It seems very cognitive rather than emotional,
Yes,
right?
it is
So,
very cognitive rather than emotional. But I think I remember writing this as like, yes, it is my empathy towards the students, because I remember, without re-experiencing it, but I remember how they felt. And so that's why I named it empathy. But it's not re-experiencing that. And I agree, that would be a crappy gift.
But we've got some good gifts from Martha.
Oh, yay! I didn't want to interfere. I just thought I saw a few people slipping out. And, so as you may know, traditionally, after our talks, we have wine and cheese and nibbles, but we can't do that indoors anymore.
Uh-huh.
So, but we didn't want them to go off.
Oh,
on their
that's so nice.
anything.
I still carry my folder.
Oh, good.
Oh.
So each week is something different. And of course, for your talk, what could be more appropriate than a worry ball? So,
Worry brain.
A worry brain, exactly.
you want to pass it
Yeah.
around?
So,
That's lovely. I like the little brain.